The morning sun cut across the arid Nevada desert, painting the military base in muted shades of gold and amber. Dust swirled lazily across the training grounds, stirred by the occasional vehicle and the hurried footsteps of soldiers making their rounds. Sergeant Emily Carter adjusted her worn, scratched rifle scope and exhaled, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon settle against her shoulder. The scope had been with her for over a decade, its once polished surface now etched with faint scars, reminders of every mission, every competition, every long-range shot that had tested the limits of her skill. Most of the younger soldiers mocked it openly. They called it antique junk, a relic from a past era when precision relied more on patience and discipline than on electronic targeting systems. Emily had heard the snickers countless times at first. It had annoyed her. Then she'd learned to ignore it. Experience, she had discovered long ago, wasn't measured in equipment or popularity, but in results. And her results were undeniable, even if few around her had ever witnessed them firsthand. She crouched behind a makeshift barricade, squinting through the scope at the distant target, an ominous black circle barely visible against the hazy desert horizon. The distance was extreme, nearly 3 kilometers, and the wind whispered over. The sand, unpredictable and teasing. Emily's mind raced through a meticulous checklist. Wind speed, humidity, angle, temperature, bullet drop. Even the subtle vibration in her hands from holding her posture too long. Every factor mattered. One miscalculation, one slip in focus, and the shot would be wasted. "Hey, Antique!" came a familiar voice, punctuated with laughter. Emily didn't look up. She had learned early in her career that engaging with ridicule only gave it power. Still, the voice belonged to Private Thompson, a brash 22-year-old with a penchant for showing off his fancy digital-assisted scope. "You seriously think the thing can even hit that dot?" Emily's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. "We'll see," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She knew what the others didn't. This scope, old and battered, carried the memory of a world record, a secret few knew, and even fewer understood. Etched near the eyepiece, almost invisible to anyone not looking closely, was the mark, world record 3,210 meters. That record had been hers, set years ago in a competition so elite that only a handful of military marksmen had witnessed it, but the memory of that moment, of holding her breath, calculating every factor, and seeing her bullet strike the target at an unimaginable distance. It was hers alone. The wind shifted. Emily adjusted her stance. Her boots sank slightly into the sand as she balanced herself, the rifle an extension of her body. Around her, the younger soldiers were already adjusting their scopes, checking their gadgets, double-checking wind meters, all the while snickering under their breaths. Emily's calm focus made them uneasy. She didn't rely on gadgets, not because she was stubborn, but because she knew the fundamentals of her craft were enough, had always been enough. Her thoughts drifted briefly, memories slipping in like ghosts across the desert. She remembered her first shooting competition, years ago, where a similar group of younger competitors had laughed at her age and the outdated equipment she carried. She had smiled then, too, and had reminded herself to focus. By the end of that day, she had not only beaten her peers, but had set a record that became legendary in certain circles of the military. And yet, here she was, once again, facing mockery. Some things, it seemed, never changed. "Seriously, you're going down today, Emily," Thompson said, smirking and leaning on his scope. "Better hope that old thing actually works." Others chuckled behind him. Emily didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. Her hands moved naturally, almost rhythmically, as she adjusted the elevation, checked the wind gauge, and centered. Her breathing. Every motion had been drilled into her muscle memory over countless hours of practice. The instructor's whistle cut through the air sharply. Set positions. Targets appear in 3, 2, 1. Emily's heartbeat quickened slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was where skill triumphed over noise, where patience outshone arrogance. She looked through the scope, noting the subtle shimmer of heat rising from the desert. Sand. The target was faint but steady, an inviting challenge for someone with years of experience. Emily's finger rested lightly on the trigger, every fiber of her being concentrated on the calculation ahead. The younger soldiers began firing almost immediately, their shots ringing out in rapid succession. Thompson's bullet ricocheted wide of the mark. A few others hit the outer rings. The snickers and smirks didn't fade, but there was a faint tremor of uncertainty creeping in. Emily exhaled slowly. The moment had come. She adjusted the scope minutely, measuring the drift of the wind and the angle of the sun. She remembered a lesson she had learned years ago. Speed is the enemy of accuracy. Patience is the ally of precision. Her breath synchronized with the subtle vibration of her body, her heartbeat a steady drum. Emily fired the first shot. Time seemed to stretch. The bullet sailed across the air, following a perfect arc, and struck the target dead center. A hush fell over the range. Heads turned, whispers spread. Thompson's confident smirk faltered, replaced by disbelief. Emily's second shot followed just as flawlessly. Every calculation she had made, every lesson she had absorbed over years of practice, was confirmed in that instant. The general, who had arrived unexpectedly that morning and had been observing quietly from the sidelines, stepped closer. He was an imposing figure, yet his eyes betrayed curiosity. He leaned down to inspect Emily's scope, noting its worn exterior, and then his gaze caught the faint engraving. His eyebrows arched. World record 3,210 meters? He muttered under his breath. The soldiers who had laughed moments ago froze. The revelation of her secret past hung heavy in the desert air, unspoken but electric with tension. Emily lowered her rifle, her expression calm and unreadable. Around her, the younger soldiers looked at each other in disbelief. They had been so certain that appearance defined capability, so sure that flashy gear outmatched experience, and yet here was proof. To the contrary. Emily didn't gloat, didn't boast. She simply prepared for her next shot. The lesson was not in humiliation. It was in demonstration. Skill, patience, and relentless practice spoke louder than mockery or ridicule ever could. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the base. Emily's focus remained unbroken. She adjusted her stance slightly, wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, and continued to prepare for her series of shots. Every movement was deliberate, every calculation precise. The young soldiers, previously confident and mocking, now watched in silent awe. Emily Carter, with her ancient scope and unmatched discipline, was a reminder of what true mastery looked like: quiet, steadfast, and unstoppable. Even as the general continued his inspection, clearly impressed, Emily's mind was already working ahead, thinking through angles, wind patterns, and subtle adjustments. There would be more tests, more eyes, and more doubt to overcome, but she welcomed the challenge. For Emily, the mockery of others had never mattered. The only measure of success was whether she could hit her mark, every time, with absolute precision. And today, as always, she intended to prove herself, not to them, but to herself. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a vast canvas for her skill. The worn scope, scratched and ancient, rested against her cheek like an old friend. Few knew its history, fewer appreciated its legacy, but Emily didn't need them to. She had built herself on patience, discipline, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. And as the first round of the long-distance exercise ended, one truth became undeniable. Appearances could deceive, mockery could falter, but mastery, true mastery, was unmistakable. The morning sun had climbed higher, burning off the desert haze and turning the dust into shimmering gold motes. Emily Carter remained crouched behind her barricade, her gaze steady on the distant target. Around her, the younger soldiers fidgeted, checking their scopes and devices again and again, whispering to each other with nervous laughter. The memory of Emily's last 2 perfect shots lingered in their minds like an unspoken challenge they were not prepared to meet. Thompson, the loudest of the mocking soldiers, leaned against his rifle, frowning, his earlier smirk replaced by uneasy doubt. "Are you sure that thing even works?" he muttered, almost to himself. A few of the others glanced at him, shifting uncomfortably. Emily said nothing. Words were unnecessary. Actions were louder. She had proven more than enough. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the nervous energy surrounding her, and it made the young soldier's confidence waver. The instructor, a wiry man named Sergeant Daniels, blew his whistle sharply, signaling the start of the long-distance marksmanship trial. "Positions," he barked. 3 kilometers. That's the farthest shot today. Let's see who's ready. And who's just playing dress-up with fancy equipment. The team groaned. Emily didn't flinch. She shifted slightly, feeling the familiar vibration of her boots sinking into the sand. Her rifle felt heavy but steady, like an extension of her own body. Every part of her, from the focus in her eyes to the tension in her fingers, was aligned, ready to execute the calculations that had been drilled into her muscle memory over countless years. The general, still observing from the edge of the range, stepped closer, his sharp gaze tracking Emily's movements. He had a commanding presence, yet he didn't intimidate her. Instead, he intrigued her. Observing quietly, as he had, he seemed to sense something beneath the surface that most others overlooked. Emily adjusted her scope slightly, noting the faint shimmer of heat rising from the desert. She could feel the wind picking up, shifting slightly to the west. Every detail mattered. "Come on, Emily," Thompson whispered under his breath. "Just don't embarrass yourself." His words were meant to provoke, but Emily's expression remained serene. She inhaled slowly, letting the tension flow out with her breath. She had been mocked countless times before, and each time she had let the results speak louder than the ridicule. Today would be no different. Emily's first calculations ran through her mind like a familiar rhythm. Wind at 10 meters per second. Slightly gusty. Temperature rising steadily, affecting the trajectory. Bullet drop calculated precisely, factoring in gravity, air density, and distance. Her left eye adjusted the scope, aligning the crosshairs on the faint black dot far across the desert. Her right hand rested lightly on the trigger, ready but relaxed. Patience was her ally. Speed was her enemy. Around her, the other soldiers began firing. Thompson's first shot hit the outer edge of the target, a disappointing start that earned a few stifled laughs from the others, trying to cover their nerves. Emily exhaled, letting her finger rest gently against the trigger. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The general's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he observed her. There was a rhythm to her preparation that demanded attention. He leaned down, squinting through his binoculars at the precise way she measured the environment, her meticulous attention to detail. He had seen many sharpshooters, but few exhibited such calm control over both their body and mind. Emily's focus was a lesson in discipline in itself. She adjusted her scope minutely again, recalculating the angle of descent and the influence of crosswinds. Emily had learned over years of practice that small details often made the difference between a hit and a miss. She took a final deliberate breath, her heartbeat steady, and fired the first shot. The bullet sailed in a smooth arc over the desert sands. Time seemed to stretch as everyone watched it disappear in the shimmering heat. And then a sharp thud. Dead center. A hush fell across the range. Thompson's jaw tightened, disbelief flickering across his face. He motioned to his fellow soldiers, but no one could look away. Emily fired the second shot, and it landed with the same unerring precision. Each strike seemed impossible given the distance, given the age scope, given the desert winds that constantly threatened to shift the trajectory. Impossible, whispered one young recruit under his breath, glancing nervously at Thompson, whose earlier confidence was now visibly shaken. Emily adjusted slightly for her third shot, remaining silent and composed. Each movement was measured, deliberate. Around her, the younger soldiers were murmuring quietly now, some struggling to contain their awe, others too embarrassed to speak. Emily's presence was commanding without words. She didn't need to argue, didn't need to justify herself. The results would do that for her. The general, noticing the precision, took a few steps closer. His keen eyes caught the faint etching on her scope, almost invisible to anyone not looking carefully. Leaning in, he murmured under his breath, "World record, 3,210 meters." His voice was soft, but it carried weight. Emily continued, unaware that the recognition had begun. Thompson's hands shook slightly as he adjusted his high-tech scope. He fired again and missed entirely, the bullet landing far off the target. Several others followed, their confidence faltering as they witnessed Emily's flawless execution. Mockery had vanished, replaced by a grudging respect that none of them were ready to admit. Emily fired again, her fourth shot hitting perfectly. Then a fifth. The desert seemed to hold its breath around her. Even the instructor paused for a moment, recognizing the sheer skill on display. Emily had become the eye of a storm calm, precise and unyielding while chaos and doubt swirled around her. The general stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the scope again. He whispered something to the instructor, who nodded silently, understanding the significance immediately. Emily lowered her rifle, taking a moment to let her arms rest. Sweat glistened on her brow, but her expression was calm, unreadable. She didn't seek attention, didn't crave recognition. Yet she knew she had commanded it. The younger soldiers exchanged glances, shame mingled with awe. They had underestimated her, ridiculed her, assumed the old scope was useless. And yet here she was, demonstrating precision, skill, and control that no fancy equipment could match. Their assumptions crumbled quietly, painfully, as they realized the truth. Emily Carter's mastery could not be measured by appearances or gadgets. Emily took a deep breath, scanning the horizon for the last target of the series. She adjusted her stance slightly, feeling the wind shift again, noticing the subtle shimmer from the desert heat. The desert was an unforgiving teacher, but Emily had long since learned its lessons. Her scope, battered and scratched, had seen more sunrises, more miles, more challenges than any of her peers' brand-new toys. And it had never failed her. Thompson finally muttered under his breath, a mix of awe and frustration. How is she doing this? No one had an answer. Emily didn't need one. Skill, discipline, and experience qualities, forged over years of practice, were answering for her. The general, now standing just behind Emily, allowed himself a small nod of approval. Recognition had finally arrived, though quietly in the way that mattered most. Acknowledgement of true skill. Emily didn't glance at him. She had never depended on approval, only on results. And today she had delivered them flawlessly. The instructor blew his whistle again, signaling the end of the round. Soldiers collected their rifles, murmuring among themselves, still struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. Emily, however, remained kneeling, adjusting her scope and taking a final careful measurement of the distance. Even as the mockery faded into stunned silence, she knew the work wasn't done. Mastery was continuous, and every shot was a lesson, even for someone as experienced as she. As Emily finally stood, dust clinging to her uniform and boots, the general stepped forward. His expression one of rare approval. His gaze lingered on the scope, and he seemed to recognize the story it told. Decades of discipline, patience, and skill etched in scratched metal. Emily's peers, once loud with laughter, now approached hesitantly, uncertain how to address the one they had dismissed. But Emily simply packed her rifle and adjusted her gear, quiet and composed, letting the results of her actions speak louder than any words could. The morning sun blazed across the desert, casting long shadows over the base. Emily's presence, unassuming yet commanding, left an indelible impression on all who had witnessed her performance. Today had begun with mockery and disbelief, but it ended with quiet admiration and the unmistakable lesson that true skill and patience could overcome even the harshest doubt. Emily Carter, with her battered old scope, had turned ridicule into revelation, setting the stage for challenges that would test not just aim, but the perception of everyone around her. The desert seemed almost to hold its breath. Emily Carter remained kneeling behind her barricade, her body perfectly still, the weight of the war rifle settled firmly against her shoulder. Around her, the younger soldiers muttered under their breath, their earlier bravado now replaced with uncertainty and awe. The sun blazed overhead, reflecting off the metallic parts of their modern scopes, but nothing could match the calm precision of Emily's aged, scratched lens. It was a paradox, a relic from another era, holding dominion over technology and youth. Alike. Emily adjusted her stance, aligning her scope with a faint black dot on the distant range. The target was nearly 3 kilometers away, barely visible, against the shimmering desert heat. Sweat beaded on her brow, and a faint gust of wind rustled the sand around her boots. Her breathing slowed, measured, steady. Each inhalation a metronome syncing her mind, body, and rifle. This wasn't just a shot, it was a disciplined ritual honed over years of practice and unyielding determination. Around her, Thompson shifted nervously. His high-tech scope had been praised repeatedly by his peers, touted as the pinnacle of modern marksmanship. Yet, every shot he fired seemed to falter, slightly off target, misjudged in subtle ways he hadn't anticipated. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues on him, searching for an explanation, and a creeping panic gnawed at his confidence. Emily's silence amplified the tension. No taunts, no reassurance. Just her unbroken focus. The instructor blew his whistle, signaling the next sequence of shots. Emily inhaled slowly, felt the faint vibration of the rifle against her cheek, and squeezed the trigger gently. The first bullet traced an invisible arc across the desert, spinning through the heat. Waves like a guided ghost. Time seemed to stretch, every second elongated as all eyes tracked the projectile. Then, the unmistakable sound of impact. Dead center, a hush descended across the training range. Private Thompson's jaw tightened. He stared, disbelief etched on his face. Around him, soldiers exchanged astonished glances, whispering incredulously. Emily didn't flinch. She merely adjusted her grip, scanning the target through her scope again. A second shot followed almost immediately, and it landed with the same flawless precision. Each impact a testament to patience, skill, and experience qualities that could not be simulated by digital aids. The general, standing slightly apart from the chaos of murmuring soldiers, leaned closer. His gaze sharpened as he studied Emily's movements. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. Her eyes scanned the range, calculating distances and wind adjustments, factoring in the subtle shimmer of desert heat that distorted perception. He noted the intricate precision of her muscle memory, the slight tension in her fingers, the way she synchronized her breathing with the trigger squeeze, the micro-adjustments she made that no one else noticed. Whispers spread through the younger Soldiers, a mixture of awe and uncertainty. How is she doing that? One murmured. Thompson's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by tense frustration. Every shot Emily fired challenged their assumptions, breaking down years of ingrained prejudice about youth, technology, and appearances. The old scope, battered and scratched, became a symbol of her mastery. Emily inhaled deeply, her focus sharpening. With the desert heat, she adjusted the scope ever so slightly, fine-tuning her angle for subtle wind drift. Even a slight miscalculation at this distance would send the bullet far off mark. Her pulse remained steady, her mind a calculated machine, measuring variables with relentless precision. This wasn't luck. This was discipline, honed over countless mornings like this, under sun and wind and doubt. Thompson fired again and missed. Entirely, his frustration mounting. Another soldier's bullet landed only slightly off-center, but the difference was stark against Emily's flawless sequence. The juxtaposition was undeniable. Mockery had faded into silent respect, tinged with disbelief. Emily didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. Her composure was her shield and her message. Skill needed no applause. The general took a step closer, drawn by the mechanical elegance of her movements. His eyes caught the faint etching near the eyepiece. World record, 3,210 meters. Recognition flickered in his expression. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "She's the one." Emily lowered the scope briefly, as if sensing the shift in attention but not needing it. She had long been accustomed to working in the shadows, letting results speak louder than words. Emily's third shot flew, a perfect arc cutting through the shimmering heat. The bullet struck with the same unerring accuracy as the first two. A younger soldiers froze. Their modern equipment was useless in comparison. One by one, murmurs of astonishment spread, and a few turned their eyes toward the general, unsure of how to respond to the demonstration before them. Sergeant Daniels, the instructor, whistled quietly, acknowledging Emily's perfection. Even he, with decades of experience, couldn't ignore the skill on display. Emily remained kneeling, recalculating for the next shot, her movements deliberate, unhurried. This wasn't about proving a point. It was about executing mastery, the quiet discipline that had defined her career. Every motion was a reflection of years spent training in deserts, ranges, and competitions, each reinforcing lessons about patience, focus, and precision. Thompson's frustration boiled over. He whispered angrily, more to himself than anyone else. How does she do it? Emily's gaze didn't waver. She didn't respond. She inhaled, adjusted for the wind's subtle shift, and fired again. Another perfect impact. A fifth, a sixth. Each shot erased doubt, replaced it with awe. The general's interest grew. He observed her like a chess player, watching a grandmaster, noticing patterns, predicting adjustments. He could see the rhythm of her calculations, the seamless blend of intuition and technical skill. For someone trained to recognize excellence, Emily's actions spoke volumes. He stepped closer, curious about the scope itself, drawn to the history and precision embedded in the worn equipment. Emily's mind remained in the zone. Calculations ran like clockwork. Wind angle, temperature, air density, bullet drop, and distance. Even the faint vibration in her hands was accounted for. Her focus was absolute. She knew that mastery wasn't flashy or loud. It was quiet, relentless, and exacting. Every shot she fired reinforced that lesson. The other soldiers, previously confident and mocking, now observed with awe and hesitation. They had underestimated her for years, assuming that new technology and youth automatically conferred superiority. Emily's flawless demonstration shattered that illusion. Skill, practice, and patience qualities independent of tools were. The true determinants of success. Emily lowered her rifle briefly, adjusting her posture. Sweat glistened on her forehead, yet her face remained calm, unreadable. She had made her point. The desert heat, the distance, the pressure of observation, all had been factors she had accounted for meticulously. The general's eyes remained fixed on the scope, noting the faint etching near the lens. Recognition had begun. Thompson shifted, nervously, glancing at the general and then back at Emily. There was a mixture of shame and admiration in his expression. They had all laughed at her old scope, assuming her era was past. And yet, here she was, executing shots with precision that dwarfed their own attempts. The wind shifted again, subtle and unpredictable. Emily adjusted, recalculated, and fired. Once more. Another perfect strike. A hush fell across the range. Soldiers exchanged glances, some unable to hide their disbelief. Even the instructor nodded subtly, impressed and cautious. Emily's presence was commanding without arrogance. She didn't need validation. The shots themselves were evidence. The general stepped even closer, recognition dawning fully as he inspected the scope again. World record. 3,210 meters, he murmured under his breath. A faint smile crossed his lips, appreciation clear in his eyes. He had seen many sharpshooters, but few possessed the calm, disciplined precision Emily displayed. Few could align mind, body, and rifle so seamlessly. Emily prepared her final shots of the sequence. Around her, the younger soldiers, humbled and amazed, observed quietly. Mockery had vanished, replaced with respect that words could not fully express. Emily fired, adjusting minutely for every variable. Every shot landed perfectly, reinforcing the lesson. Mastery transcended tools, experience outweighed youth, and patience conquered arrogance. As the sequence ended, Emily lowered her rifle, dust clinging to her uniform and boots. She exhaled, slowly, letting the tension flow out with her breath. The desert seemed to exhale alongside her, the heat now a backdrop rather than an adversary. The demonstration had ended, and the quiet recognition of her skill settled over the range like a tangible weight. Asterisk, the general nodded, approvingly but quietly, acknowledging not just her technical excellence, but her discipline, patience, and unspoken authority. Emily had proven more than accuracy. She had demonstrated the power of quiet mastery. Around her, soldiers who had mocked her were silent, some hesitant, others in awe. Thompson's earlier arrogance had crumbled entirely. Emily collected her gear with the calm composure of someone who had always worked quietly and let her skill speak. The old scope, scratched and battered, remained a symbol of decades of dedication and accomplishment. Today, it had told a story louder than any words. Could skill, patience, and experience conquer mockery, arrogance, and even advanced technology? The desert stretched endlessly ahead, shimmering in heat waves. Emily Carter, kneeling and adjusting her scope, had turned doubt into revelation, mockery into respect, and skill into undeniable truth. This was only the beginning. The lesson would continue to unfold for those willing to watch and learn. Asterisk. The desert heat shimmered above the sand like a mirage as Emily Carter's final rounds settled into the target, each one dead center. The young soldiers around her had gone silent, their laughter from earlier replaced by an uneasy awe. Private Thompson stood frozen, jaw slack, gripping his modern scope as if it might somehow redeem him. But the truth was obvious. Emily Carter, with her battered old scope, had just demonstrated skill and precision that none of their new technology could match. The general, tall and imposing, stepped forward. He had been observing quietly, his sharp gaze following every movement Emily made. Now, curiosity overcame protocol. He approached her barricade, the boots of his polished uniform crunching on the sand. Emily remained kneeling, adjusting the scope for a brief glance at the heat waves above the target. Her expression was calm, unreadable, and perfectly still. She had long since grown accustomed to attention, not seeking it, but never avoiding it either. He crouched slightly, lowering his face near the worn lens, and noticed it. An engraving near the eyepiece, small and subtle, almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention. He reached out and traced the faint letters with his finger. World record. 3,210 meters, he murmured, eyes widening slightly. The sound of his voice drew the attention of the entire range. Soldiers turned in unison, gasping softly at the words. The mark was unmistakable, a testament to a feat they had never imagined Emily had achieved. Emily lowered the rifle, her calm eyes meeting the general's. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, almost as though confirming something obvious. "It was a record I set years ago." Her tone was flat, matter-of-fact, as if the incredible achievement was nothing more than a footnote in her life. Around her, whispers erupted among the younger soldiers. Shock, awe, and disbelief rippled like waves. Thompson's earlier arrogance vanished entirely, replaced by a mix of shame and reluctant admiration. The general straightened slightly, still studying the engraving, then looked back at Emily. You're the one who set this?" he asked, voice low but filled with genuine respect. Emily nodded, her posture unwavering. She didn't elaborate unless asked. Her accomplishments had always spoken louder than words, and the proof now lay in the shattered expectations of the soldiers around her. Thompson muttered, barely audible, I didn't know." His gaze flicked nervously between Emily and the general. The other soldiers, equally embarrassed by their earlier mockery, whispered quietly among themselves. Emily had become something of a legend in that moment, even to those who had never heard her story. And yet she remained grounded, her calm demeanor unbroken. The instructor, Sergeant Daniels, approached the general. "Sir, that engraving, it's authentic. She set a world record in long-range shooting years ago, 3,210 meters. Not many know about it outside elite circles." The general's eyes narrowed slightly, absorbing the significance. His keen mind quickly assessed the implications. Here was a soldier whose skill had been hidden in plain sight, whose talent had been underestimated by both peers and hierarchy alike. Emily adjusted the scope once more, feeling the familiar grooves under her fingers, the engraved letters almost comforting. She remembered the day she had set the record vividly, the long hours of preparation, the meticulous calculations, the thrill of watching the bullet traverse impossible distances before striking the target with perfect accuracy. It had been a moment of triumph, celebrated quietly among a handful of witnesses. Today, she realized that quiet triumph was about to become a revelation for many more. The general gestured toward the target, then back at Emily. "Your technique, your control. It's remarkable. And with that scope, this scope, it's a testament to precision and discipline, not just equipment." Emily nodded slightly. She had never relied on gadgets to define her, only her own skill. And now, seeing the recognition in his eyes, she allowed herself a small sense of satisfaction. Not pride, exactly, she didn't need validation, but satisfaction that her abilities were finally acknowledged by someone who understood their depth. The younger soldiers, still murmuring among themselves, began approaching hesitantly. "Sergeant Carter, we didn't realize," one said, voice shaky. Another added, "We thought the scope. We thought it couldn't." Emily cut them off gently, raising a hand. "I've never needed anyone to believe in my tools," she said calmly. "Skill isn't in the equipment. It's in practice, patience, and precision. You'll understand when you've spent enough hours learning to calculate everything that affects a shot." Thompson looked down at the sand, embarrassed. He had mocked her repeatedly, confident in his modern gear and youth. And yet, here he was humbled. Emily's actions and the evidence of the world record left no room for argument. Technology alone could not replace years of dedication, focus, and experience. The lesson was harsh, but necessary. And Emily, as always, let her skill teach more than her words ever could. The general studied Emily for a moment longer, then addressed the group. This is exactly the kind of soldier we want. Someone whose skill transcends technology. Someone whose patience and precision set an example for all of us. Sergeant Carter, your record, your performance, it's extraordinary. And it proves a lesson some of you need to learn. His gaze swept over the group, emphasizing the point. Every soldier shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their assumptions had been shallow, their judgment hasty. Emily carefully cleaned her scope, running her fingers along the scratched metal, feeling the engraved letters under her touch. The scope was more than a tool. It was a symbol of decades of dedication, countless hours in the sun and wind, and a silent testament to her mastery. She had never flaunted it, never drawn attention to the record etched into it. Recognition had always been secondary to skill. Yet today, standing under the desert sun, surrounded by awestruck soldiers and a general who now understood her expertise, the significance of her accomplishment finally felt tangible. Thompson, still struggling to process everything, asked quietly, How did you even do it? That distance? The wind, the heat. Emily looked at him, her gaze steady and calm. By focusing on the fundamentals, she said, every variable matters. Every detail counts. You learn to anticipate, to calculate, to adjust. Technology can help, but it can't replace knowledge. Patience and practice. Nothing can replace experience. The young soldiers listened, silent, absorbing the lesson. Their earlier arrogance had crumbled, replaced with respect tempered by humility. Emily's actions had not only demonstrated skill, but had forced a confrontation with their assumptions. The lesson was clear. Mastery cannot be faked, cannot be rushed, and cannot be replaced by gadgets alone. The general nodded approvingly. Sergeant Carter, you've shown more than precision today. You've taught a lesson many of these soldiers need to learn: discipline, patience, and respect for skill. I want your techniques documented, your experience shared. This isn't just a performance. It's a teaching moment. Emily inclined her head subtly, acknowledging the compliment without pride. Her focus had always been on results, not accolades. Yet even she felt a quiet satisfaction that the lesson would reach beyond the range, beyond the base, beyond her own experience. Emily carefully packed her rifle, the worn scope resting securely in its case. Around her, whispers continued, admiration growing quietly but unmistakably. The soldiers who had mocked her now approached hesitantly, some asking questions, others simply watching in awe. She answered patiently, explaining subtle adjustments, breathing techniques, and how she accounted for every environmental factor. The scope had been mocked, the record nearly forgotten, yet both now stood as undeniable proof of her skill and dedication. The desert stretched endlessly before her, the wind kicking up fine dust that danced in the sun's rays. Emily's presence had transformed the atmosphere of the base. Mockery had been replaced by respect, doubt by fascination. The lesson had been delivered not through lectures, but through execution. Her skill had spoken for her, loud and unmistakable, leaving an impression that would not be forgotten. Thompson finally spoke, voice low and hesitant. Sergeant, I misjudged you. I thought it was just the scope, not skill. Emily nodded, accepting the admission without judgment. She had learned long ago that humility often came after lessons were earned the hard way. She didn't need to scold or gloat. The evidence was undeniable. **. The general's gaze lingered on Emily's scope one final time. "That mark," he said quietly. "It's more than just metal. It's history. It's skill. It's discipline. Few understand what it represents. You've made that clear today." Emily allowed a faint smile, a rare acknowledgement of pride. Not arrogance, but recognition. The scope had carried a record, yes, but more importantly, it had carried a legacy of focus, dedication, and mastery. As Emily walked off the range, her boots stirring small clouds of dust, the desert wind carried the sound of whispers awestruck, reflective and respectful. She had turned ridicule into revelation, mockery into admiration, and an old scratched scope into a symbol of excellence. Today, every soldier had witnessed more than marksmanship. They had witnessed a lesson in discipline, patience, and the quiet power of skill, honed over time. And as the sun climbed higher, burning the sand into shimmering gold, Emily Carter's reputation, once unnoticed, often mocked, now fully recognized, began to cement itself as one of the most respected among soldiers on that Nevada base. Her scope, etched with a world record and worn by years of use, was no longer merely a tool. It was a symbol, a reminder that true mastery cannot be denied, ignored, or replaced. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada base, glinting off the sand and the metallic surfaces of rifles, scopes, and helmets. But Emily Carter barely noticed. Her focus was elsewhere, on the ripple of change that had quietly begun after the general's acknowledgement of her world record. The earlier ridicule had vanished, replaced with a cautious awe among her peers. She could feel it in the way soldiers moved around her, hesitant to speak carelessly, respectful in their glances, curious in their questions. Thompson, the most vocal of her earlier detractors, approached first. He shuffled his feet, gaze fixed on the ground, hands fidgeting with the strap of his rifle. "Sergeant, I just wanted to say, I misjudged you," he said, voice low and hesitant. Emily looked at him, her expression calm, almost maternal in its serenity. She didn't mock his earlier arrogance. She didn't belittle him. Instead, she nodded slightly. "Skill isn't about what others think," she said softly, her voice steady, carrying the weight of experience without arrogance. "It's about focus, discipline, and patience. If you learn that, you won't need anyone's approval to succeed." Thompson's eyes lifted to meet hers, a flicker of understanding passing through his expression. The lesson sank in quietly, but it was unmistakable. Respect had been earned not by lectures, but by performance. One by one, other soldiers approached, each offering hesitant questions or tentative apologies for their earlier behavior. Emily answered each calmly, demonstrating patience that seemed infinite. She explained her methods in detail, how she calculated wind speed, factored in temperature and air pressure, accounted for bullet drop, and adjusted for the slightest desert heat shimmer. Every answer reinforced the earlier demonstration. Her knowledge wasn't theoretical. It was lived, tested, proven. The general, observing from a short distance, nodded approvingly. He could see the transformation happening before him. What had started as mockery was now a shift in culture, subtle but unmistakable. Emily's quiet authority commanded respect, not because she demanded it, but because she demonstrated excellence with humility. Soldiers were beginning to understand that mastery came from dedication, not technology, not age, not appearances. Emily spent the remainder of the morning running a series of demonstrations for her team. She walked slowly along the range, adjusting rifles, pointing out subtle wind cues, explaining how even the tiniest misalignment could result in a missed shot at extreme distance. The young soldiers hung on every word, their earlier arrogance replaced with curiosity and admiration. Emily never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her skill was evident in every movement, every shot, every calm decision. Thompson attempted another long-distance shot, this time under Emily's guidance. He adjusted his posture, recalculated angles, and followed her instructions carefully. When he fired, the bullet landed closer to the target than any of his previous attempts. He looked at Emily in awe, the shame of prior mockery still lingering, but now paired with a newfound respect. I see it now," he admitted. "It's not the scope, it's everything else." Emily nodded, offering a faint smile. "Yes," she said simply. "It's the knowledge, the patience, the preparation. The tool helps, but it doesn't make the shooter. You have to earn every shot." Around them, the other soldiers murmured agreement, their skepticism fully replaced with attention and curiosity. Emily's influence was spreading quietly, like a ripple through still water. The general approached, hands clasped behind his back, his authoritative presence commanding attention. "Sergeant Carter," he began, voice carrying a formal weight, "you've demonstrated skill, discipline, and leadership. I want your techniques documented and shared with the base. Your approach should become a standard for training. This isn't just about marksmanship. It's about teaching soldiers how to think, calculate, and focus. We've underestimated what one person can teach an entire unit." Emily inclined her head subtly, accepting the recognition without fanfare. As the morning progressed, Emily held mini-sessions with her team, breaking down each element of her marksmanship techniques. She explained subtle cues from the desert environment, how to feel the pulse of the wind through the sand, the importance of mental focus, and how to synchronize breathing with each shot. Soldiers listened intently, absorbing lessons they had previously dismissed as irrelevant. Emily's authority was not based on rank alone. It was earned, undeniable, and rooted in experience and demonstrated excellence. By afternoon, the dynamic on the range had shifted entirely. Soldiers who had once mocked her were now cautious, respectful, eager to learn. Thompson was particularly attentive, asking detailed questions and absorbing her instructions. Emily answered each thoughtfully, demonstrating patience that emphasized the value of mastery over speed or arrogance. She encouraged them to practice meticulously, explaining that consistency and discipline were far more valuable than flash or shortcuts. Emily's quiet mentorship extended beyond mere instruction. She shared personal anecdotes from her career, the hours of preparation before her world record shot, the repeated failures that taught her resilience, the subtle lessons of patience and observation she had learned in remote desert ranges. Stories captivated her audience, turning admiration into genuine understanding. Soldiers began seeing the desert, the range, and the act of marksmanship differently, through the eyes of someone who had mastered them over decades. The general observed this transformation, noting how Emily's influence was reshaping the base culture. Soldiers began to approach training with newfound humility, awareness, and curiosity. Her calm authority and tangible skill provided a model for how to combine discipline, patience, and knowledge into real results. Emily's legacy was beginning to take root not in records or accolades, but in the behavior and mindset of her peers. By evening, the range was quiet, the long shadows of the desert stretching across the sand. Emily packed her rifle and scope, carefully ensuring the worn equipment was secure. The soldiers had begun to disperse, some approaching quietly to express thanks or ask further questions. Emily's presence lingered, not through words, but through the lessons she had imparted. Respect had been earned, not demanded, and it radiated from every interaction she had with her peers. Thompson lingered, unsure how to articulate the shift he felt. Finally, he said, "Sergeant, I just wanted to say thank you for showing us how it's done, for everything." Emily nodded, her expression calm, acknowledging both his gratitude and his growth. She had never sought their approval, but she recognized that teaching, mentoring, and demonstrating excellence was as important as hitting any target. The general lingered as well, his eyes still on Emily and her scope. "This is more than marksmanship," he said. "It's leadership, example, and legacy. Few understand how rare this combination is. You've made your mark not just on the record books, but on this entire base." Emily allowed herself a faint, subtle smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the recognition she had earned, not for glory, but for the lesson imparted and the respect cultivated. As night fell, the desert cooled, the heat giving way to a crisp evening breeze. Emily Carter walked, alone for a moment, reflecting on the day. The ridicule of the morning had transformed into respect, curiosity, and admiration. Her old scope, scratched and battered, had become a symbol of mastery and perseverance. Today, she had not only proven her skill, but had inspired others to rethink assumptions, respect discipline, and value true mastery over superficial appearances. The stars began to appear in the desert sky, small points of light against the vast darkness. Emily gazed upward, feeling the satisfaction that came from having led by example. She didn't need accolades or fanfare. The knowledge that her peers now understood, even a little, what true skill required was enough. Respect had been earned. Quietly, steadily, and indelibly. In the days that followed, the shift in the base was undeniable. Soldiers approached their own training with more focus, paying attention to details they had once ignored. Emily's calm mentorship had sown seeds that would grow far beyond her direct instruction. Her presence had become a standard of excellence, a benchmark for both discipline and humility. Her skill was no longer a hidden secret. It was a living, breathing lesson in what dedication and mastery could achieve. By the end of the week, Emily's influence had become part of the base's culture. Training sessions incorporated lessons she had demonstrated. Younger soldiers referenced her techniques in practice. The old scope, once mocked, became an emblem of excellence. Emily herself remained grounded, focused on precision, discipline, and teaching. She had never sought to dominate through rank or arrogance, only to lead through example. Her respect was earned, not demanded. Her influence extended quietly, touching each soldier she taught. And through it all, Emily Carter's legacy grew. Not in boastful records or recognition, but in the respect, admiration, and improved skill of those around her. The old scope, etched with a world record, was no longer merely a tool. It was a symbol of perseverance, patience, and excellence. Lesson visible to all who were willing to see it. The Nevada desert had quieted under the fading sun, but Emily Carter's presence continued to ripple far beyond the boundaries of the base. News of her flawless long-range shooting, coupled with the discovery of her engraved world record on the worn scope, had begun to travel quickly through military channels. What had started as a local recognition soon reached commanding officers at higher levels. Reports circulated. A veteran sergeant, using an outdated scope, had repeatedly struck targets at impossible distances, demonstrating skill and precision. Unmatched by modern technology. Emily herself was largely unaware of the growing attention. Her days remained filled with training, mentoring younger soldiers, and refining her craft. Yet small indications showed her influence was spreading. Emails from other units requesting advice on long-range marksmanship arrived frequently, many addressed with an astonished, respectful tone. Orders from superiors requested that her techniques be documented, analyzed, and incorporated into broader training programs. For Emily, this was not about fame. It was about sharing knowledge, instilling discipline, and proving that mastery was earned through effort and experience. The general who had observed her performance was one of the first to champion her skills. Publicly, in meetings with other commanding officers, he referenced Emily Carter as an example of excellence, highlighting her ability to turn ridicule into recognition through sheer discipline and precision. Her story was framed not as a singular achievement, but as a teaching moment for the entire military. The combination of patience, meticulous calculation, and experience could outperform raw technology. Emily's reputation grew quietly, steadily, like a flame spreading across dry grass within days. Emily was approached by a military training coordinator from a neighboring state. "Sergeant Carter," the officer said, almost breathless with excitement, "we've heard reports of your marksmanship. We'd like to invite you to demonstrate your techniques at a regional training conference. The goal is to show other units how discipline and precision can enhance operational performance." Emily listened calmly, nodding. Invitations like these were not new, but each presented an opportunity to share lessons that she felt were long overdue. Back at the base, her peers were still adjusting to the new dynamic. Soldiers who had once mocked her were now eager to learn, asking detailed questions, following her guidance closely, and practicing with renewed focus. Thompson, once the loudest detractor, had become one of her most attentive students. He would shadow her during exercises, taking notes and carefully applying her corrections. The transformation was profound. Emily had not only earned respect, but had begun shaping the culture of training, emphasizing preparation, patience, and the nuanced understanding of long-range marksmanship. As word of her accomplishments spread beyond the base, Emily began receiving requests for interviews, briefings, and demonstrations. Military publications sought her insights on extreme distance shooting. Veteran units requested her guidance on strategy, environmental calculations, and the subtle factors that influenced bullet trajectories over great distances. Emily responded methodically, focusing not on personal recognition, but on sharing the knowledge she had cultivated over decades of disciplined practice. Her philosophy was consistent. Mastery was not about ego, but about preparation, execution, and teaching others to achieve similar results. The first public demonstration took place at a regional training conference, held on a sprawling military range outside the base. Emily arrived early, her equipment minimal yet meticulously maintained. Her old scope, polished lightly, but still marked by decades of use, rested securely on her rifle. Crowds of soldiers and instructors watched as she adjusted for wind, temperature, and humidity, calculating angles with precise mental arithmetic. Every movement was deliberate, efficient, and calm. She did not speak much. Her results were the lesson. The demonstration began. Emily fired a series of shots at extreme distances, each one landing dead center. Observers whispered in disbelief. Modern scopes and digital equipment had attempted similar tasks, but few had achieved anything close to the consistency she displayed. The combination of her patience, skill, and environmental awareness was unmatched. Emily's calm composure, coupled with the reliability of her aged scope, captivated the audience. What they saw was not merely marksmanship, it was a lesson in discipline, patience, and mastery. Questions followed after the demonstration. Emily explained the subtle adjustments she made for wind gusts, temperature fluctuations, and slight deviations in terrain. She illustrated how even small environmental changes could drastically affect trajectory over extreme distances. Soldiers took notes furiously, their earlier assumptions about reliance on technology challenged profoundly. Emily's calm, patient answers turned doubt into understanding. The lesson was clear. Skill mattered more than the latest equipment. Dedication, observation, and experience were the true determinants of success. Word of her demonstration quickly spread through military publications and internal newsletters. Photos of Emily adjusting her scope and firing at distant targets circulated, often accompanied by brief summaries of her methodology and the significance of her world record achievement. Social media buzz within military circles amplified the story, generating admiration and curiosity. Emily became a figurehead for disciplined precision, a living reminder that mastery required more than gadgets. It required relentless focus and dedication. Back at her base, Emily continued training her own team, incorporating new insights from her regional exposure. Soldiers who had initially doubted her were now more disciplined, focused, and determined to emulate her methodology. The culture shift was unmistakable. Meticulous preparation replaced haste, observation replaced assumption, and patience replaced overconfidence. Emily's influence was not only recognized externally, but felt internally, in the everyday conduct of the soldiers she guided. Even as her fame grew, Emily remained grounded. She continued to refine her technique, analyze environmental factors, and mentor her team. Recognition, while validating, was secondary to the pursuit of mastery. Her goal was simple: demonstrate the power of preparation and skill, inspire discipline, and ensure that knowledge was passed on. She never flaunted her record, though it was increasingly known. She never sought accolades, though they arrived. Inevitably, national media eventually took notice. Articles appeared highlighting Emily Carter's extraordinary abilities, focusing on her combination of experience, calm composure, and technical skill. Photographs of her battered, engraved scope drew attention, emphasizing the contrast between her modest equipment and her unmatched precision. The story captivated readers. A seasoned soldier, once mocked for using an antique tool, demonstrating world-class skill that exceeded modern technology and youthful arrogance alike. Emily's response to media attention remained consistent, calm, measured, and focused on the broader lesson. Interviews emphasized practice, patience, and understanding one's environment. She spoke of mental preparation, the importance of detailed observation, and the irreplaceable value of experience. Her words resonated, inspiring both soldiers and civilians to reconsider assumptions about skill, technology, and mastery. The narrative was clear. Results speak louder than appearance or equipment. Requests for demonstrations and mentorship continued to increase. Emily traveled to training, conferences, led workshops, and advised military units across the region. Each engagement reinforced the lesson she had long embodied. Mastery was not inherited, not purchased, and not dependent on technology. It was earned through patience, precision, and unwavering focus. Soldiers who had once doubted her were now among her most attentive students, applying her lessons with meticulous care. Even within her home base, Emily's influence became institutionalized. New training protocols incorporated her insights, emphasizing environmental calculations, precision practice, and patient execution. The culture shift was profound. Younger soldiers, previously impatient and reliant on equipment, now embraced discipline, observation, and thoughtful preparation. Emily's presence had created a lasting legacy, one that extended beyond her personal accomplishments and into the broader practices of her peers and successors. At the end of a long day, Emily often found a quiet moment alone, reflecting on the path she had taken. From ridicule to recognition, from secrecy to national attention, her journey had been defined by one principle: mastery is earned through practice, patience, and discipline. Her worn scope, etched with the world record marking, had become more than a tool. It was a symbol of perseverance, skill, and the quiet power of experience. As night fell over the Nevada desert, the stars emerging against the inky black sky, Emily Carter understood that her influence had grown far beyond the base. Soldiers across the state and soon across the nation were learning from her example. She had demonstrated that excellence could transcend technology, that skill could overcome doubt, and that patience and preparation were invaluable assets. The ripples of her quiet mastery were spreading steadily, touching more lives than she had ever anticipated. Her story, once a local secret and now a source of national attention, illustrated the enduring truth that true skill could not be faked, overlooked, or replaced. Emily Carter had become a living testament to the power of preparation, focus, and disciplined practice. And through it all, she remained humble, grounded, and dedicated to the very principles that had made her remarkable in the first place. The soft hum of the office fan did little to ease the tension as Emily Carter sat quietly at her desk. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly, shimmering under the afternoon sun, but her mind was far from the dunes. Letters, emails, and formal invitations had been piling up steadily over the past few weeks. Requests for interviews, appearances at training conferences, and features in military publications had arrived from all directions. The news of her world record achievement and unparalleled marksmanship had transcended the base and now reached national attention. Emily, however, remained remarkably composed. She had never sought recognition for her skill. Every shot, every calculation, every long hour spent perfecting her technique had been about discipline, mastery, and the silent satisfaction of personal excellence. Fame, accolades, and national attention were byproducts she neither chased nor feared. She focused on the work, letting her skill speak louder than any article or press release ever could. Her first call came from the Pentagon. A senior officer requested her presence to discuss incorporating her techniques into nationwide training protocols. "Sergeant Carter," the voice said over the secure line, "we've reviewed your performance and methodology. It's extraordinary. We'd like you to advise us on best practices for long-range marksmanship across all divisions. Your insights could reshape training for countless soldiers." Emily listened attentively, nodding, and replied with measured calm. "I'll be glad to assist," she said. "My focus is on precision, discipline, and training. Technology can assist, but the fundamentals must always come first. I'll work to ensure that principle is integrated wherever possible." The officer's acknowledgement was respectful, yet tinged with awe. Emily's influence had already surpassed the confines of her base, and now she would leave a mark on the military at a national level. Back at the Nevada base, her team watched quietly as she prepared for a regional press conference. Soldiers who had once mocked her now assisted willingly, carrying her equipment and organizing the demonstration range. Thompson, in particular, had transformed from a brash detractor into a respectful student, shadowing Emily closely and absorbing every lesson she offered. The entire unit had shifted under her influence, moving from skepticism to admiration, from haste to patience, from distraction to focus. The press conference itself drew reporters, military officials, and even civilian enthusiasts of precision shooting. Cameras clicked, microphones hovered, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Emily Carter, calm and unassuming, adjusted her scope carefully, her hands steady and practiced. She demonstrated her techniques methodically, explaining calculations for wind, heat shimmer, and bullet drop over extreme distances. Every shot she fired landed with unerring accuracy, leaving the audience visibly stunned. Journalists whispered among themselves. "She's incredible," one said. 3,210 meters with that scope. It's unbelievable." Another added, "Her skill isn't just talent, it's discipline, calculation, and experience. She's redefining what precision marksmanship means." Emily did not smile, nor did she seek attention. Her focus remained on teaching, on showing. That mastery was a product of preparation, patience, and rigorous practice. After the demonstration, she fielded questions. "How do you account for environmental factors over such long distances?" asked a reporter. Emily's response was measured. "Every variable matters. Wind, humidity, temperature, even the slight shimmer of heat on the horizon can affect a shot. You calculate, adjust, and stay disciplined. Technology can assist, but it doesn't replace knowledge and practice." That's what makes precision reliable. The room fell silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity of her words. Story quickly spread beyond military circles. National magazines, online publications, and television news segments highlighted Emily Carter's extraordinary marksmanship. Photos of her aged, scratched scope etched with the world record marking circulated widely, emphasizing the contrast between her modest equipment and her unmatched results. Emily's story captivated a broad audience. A veteran soldier, often underestimated, demonstrating skill, discipline, and precision far beyond what most thought possible. Even political leaders took notice. Invitations arrived for private briefings to discuss how her methodologies could be incorporated into broader defense strategies. Emily accepted selectively, focusing always on practical application rather than personal recognition. Each appearance reinforced the lessons she had consistently embodied. Mastery comes from preparation, patience, and experience, not gadgetry, shortcuts, or flashy appearances. Her influence was tangible, her example undeniable. Back at the base, the soldiers Emily trained were changed as well. They approached practice with heightened focus, incorporating her lessons into every exercise. Thompson, once brash and dismissive, now meticulously applied her teachings, demonstrating significant improvement. The ripple effect of her influence spread not only through her team, but across the military community as stories of her skill traveled. She had become a living example of excellence in action. Emily's national recognition did not diminish her personal discipline. She continued to rise early, train rigorously, and mentor her team with the same patience she had always exhibited. Every shot she fired, every lesson she imparted, was a reaffirmation of her philosophy. Results speak louder than words, and true skill is earned through dedication and consistent practice. Even as cameras flashed and reporters recorded, she remained focused on her work, not the applause. The general who had first recognized her skill visited once more, this time in a formal capacity. "Sergeant Carter," he said, his voice steady but impressed, "your influence has extended far beyond our expectations. Soldiers are learning from your methodology. The military is integrating your insights, and your story is inspiring countless others. You've not only set a record, you've set a standard." Emily nodded, accepting the recognition with quiet grace. That evening, after the conference, Emily walked alone along a ridge overlooking the desert. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the dunes. Her mind reflected on the journey from ridicule to national attention. The scope in her hand, etched with the world record marking, felt like more than equipment. It was a testament to years of preparation, discipline, and quiet mastery. The recognition she now received was secondary to the satisfaction of knowing her work had inspired respect, focus, and a reevaluation of what true skill meant. The following weeks brought a series of invitations to military academies and precision shooting workshops nationwide. Emily traveled sparingly but purposefully, always emphasizing methodology, discipline, and the philosophy of careful preparation. Soldiers, veterans, and even civilian enthusiasts attended her demonstrations, absorbing her techniques and philosophies. Her reputation grew steadily, but she remained humble, allowing the results and lessons to speak louder than her fame. Emily's story became a touchstone within the military community. Discussions of marksmanship, training, and discipline frequently referenced her achievements and the lessons embedded in her methods. Her influence helped reshape how soldiers approached extreme distance shooting, emphasizing observation, patience, and environmental calculation over reliance on technology alone. The once overlooked sergeant had become a national figure, not through self-promotion, but through the undeniable demonstration of skill. Even in her private moments, Emily reflected on the journey. From being mocked for her old scope to achieving recognition across the nation, every step had reinforced the principles she had lived by. Excellence requires discipline, patience, and relentless focus. Her goal had never been fame, it was mastery. And through her quiet determination, she had achieved both recognition and lasting influence. As the stars appeared over the Nevada desert, Emily Carter prepared for another round of practice. The rifles were loaded, the targets set at extreme distances, and the scope in her hands reflected decades of skill. Her legacy was no longer a secret. She had turned ridicule into respect, obscurity into national recognition, and discipline into an enduring lesson. Every shot she fired carried not just a bullet, but the philosophy of a life spent perfecting her craft. Emily's story continued to inspire. Soldiers who trained under her guidance achieved levels of precision previously thought unattainable. Young recruits referenced her demonstrations as benchmarks for their own development. Even seasoned veterans adopted her techniques, acknowledging that true mastery transcended technology, age, and initial assumptions. Emily Carter's name had become synonymous with discipline, patience, and excellence, an enduring symbol that one individual, with skill, focus, and humility, could reshape perceptions and inspire a nation. And through it all, Emily remained focused, steady, and disciplined. She didn't seek glory, only mastery. Yet her journey from ridicule to national recognition, from a worn scope to world record fame, had become a living testament. True skill, patience, and preparation were always worth pursuing, no matter how long the path or how high the target. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the golden glow of the morning sun, its vastness both humbling and inspiring. Emily Carter moved deliberately across the training range, her worn boots stirring. Clouds of dust with every step. The old scope rested securely in her hands, the faint etching of world record, 3,210 meters, catching the light, a quiet reminder of decades of discipline, practice, and perseverance. Today was more than a demonstration. It was a culmination, a reflection of a journey that had transformed ridicule into respect, obscurity into national recognition, and individual skill into enduring influence. The base was alive with energy. Soldiers who had once questioned Emily's methods now moved with focus, discipline, and curiosity. They were her students, her witnesses, and in many ways, her legacy. Thompson stood beside her, meticulously adjusting his rifle under Emily's guidance, a testament to transformation and humility. Every soldier present was absorbing lessons in patience, precision, and calculation, learning firsthand what mastery truly meant. Emily's influence had gone beyond mere technique. It had instilled a culture of respect, observation, and dedication. General observed quietly from a short distance, his presence commanding but deferential. He had seen countless soldiers and officers achieve remarkable feats. Yet Emily's consistent performance, her calm authority, and her ability to teach through action alone had left an indelible impression. Today, she would demonstrate a sequence of extreme-range shots that would solidify her legacy, not just as a marksman, but as an exemplar of discipline and mentorship. Emily knelt behind her barricade, adjusting the scope carefully. The first target stretched over 3 kilometers across the desert, a distance that challenged even the most advanced technology. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, and her focus unbroken. Around her, soldiers held their collective breath, each acutely aware that they were about to witness excellence in its purest form. Years of preparation, decades of practice, and countless lessons culminated in this moment. She fired the first round. A bullet traced an invisible arc, shimmering in the heat waves above the desert sands. When it struck dead center, a hushed awe spread through the crowd. The second shot followed, and then the third, each landing with flawless precision. Every movement Emily made was deliberate, every adjustment meticulous. The soldiers watched, captivated not only by the shots themselves, but by the embodiment of skill and discipline in every motion. The general stepped closer, examining the scope once again. World record. He murmured under his breath, noting the engraving that had first caught his attention months ago. The phrase seemed almost secondary now, a historical footnote compared to the living demonstration of mastery unfolding before him. Emily's skill, patience, and calm authority spoke louder than any accolade ever could. After completing the sequence, Emily lowered her rifle and rose slowly. Sweat glistened on her forehead, but her face remained composed. She had done more than hit targets. She had delivered a lesson, a demonstration of what consistent focus and disciplined practice could achieve. The soldiers surrounding her absorbed the quiet message. Mastery was earned, never assumed, and often invisible until proven. Thompson approached, a mixture of respect and gratitude in his eyes. "Sergeant, I can't believe I ever doubted you," he said quietly. "Watching you today, understanding the adjustments, the discipline, it's humbling." Emily nodded, her expression calm but encouraging. "The goal," she said, "isn't to be recognized or admired. It's to understand the principles, to practice relentlessly, and to apply them with patience and precision. Respect and acknowledgement are consequences, not objectives." Her words resonated throughout the crowd. Soldiers nodded silently, internalizing lessons that would guide their training and conduct for years to come. Emily had not only proven her skill, but had transformed the mindset of those around her. The culture of the base, once influenced by mockery and arrogance, had been permanently altered. Discipline, focus, and humility had become the standard. Beyond the base, Emily's story continued to inspire. National coverage highlighted her achievements and philosophy, emphasizing the contrast between her humble, worn scope and her extraordinary skill. Articles, interviews, and profiles portrayed a woman whose life exemplified the power of patience, preparation, and relentless dedication. Schools of marksmanship, both military and civilian, began adopting her methods, integrating her lessons into curricula and training manuals. Her influence extended far beyond the desert sands where she had first proven herself. Emily remained grounded throughout the growing attention. Recognition, while validating, never distracted her from her work. Every day she rose early, trained rigorously, and mentored her team. She continued refining her techniques, analyzing environmental variables, and demonstrating that mastery was an ongoing pursuit. Fame, accolades, and media attention were secondary. The true goal remained excellence and the ability to teach it to others. The general approached her once more, formally acknowledging her contributions. "Sergeant Carter, your influence has reshaped training across multiple levels of the military. Your precision, discipline, and ability to teach through example have created a standard that will endure for generations. You've secured your legacy not just through records, but through the soldiers you've inspired and the culture you've transformed." Emily inclined her head subtly, acknowledging the praise without arrogance. That evening, Emily walked alone along a quiet ridge, overlooking the desert. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the sand in a warm, golden light. She reflected on the journey, from being mocked for her old scope to achieving world record recognition, from obscurity to national attention. Every shot, every lesson, every patient hour of practice had culminated in this moment. Her legacy was no longer just her record. It was the respect she had earned, the soldiers she had influenced, and the lessons she had imparted. Emily carefully placed her rifle and scope on a small table near the edge of the ridge, gently running her fingers over the etched marking. World record, 3,210 meters. The letters seemed to glow softly in the fading light. The scope had carried decades of dedication, and now, through her actions and teaching, it carried a story that would endure far beyond her own lifetime. It was a symbol of discipline, precision, and the quiet power of mastery. She thought of Thompson, of her team, of the soldiers across the nation who had applied her methods. Each success, each lesson, each improvement in precision was a reflection of her philosophy in action. Legacy, she realized, was not built by accolades alone, but by the influence one had on others, the lives one touched, and the standards one set. Her journey had become a testament to that truth. The stars began to appear overhead, each one sharp and distant against the velvet sky. Emily gazed upward, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and skepticism. She had confronted challenges that tested her skill, patience, and resolve. And through it all, she had remained steadfast in her pursuit of mastery. The recognition, the records, the national spotlight, they were secondary to the satisfaction of knowing that her discipline and dedication had inspired others. Her final demonstration of the day was a quiet one. Alone, she set up a distant target, calculated wind, temperature, and environmental factors, and fired with flawless precision. The bullet struck exactly where she intended, a perfect testament to decades of practice, patience, and learning. It was a reminder to herself, and symbolically to the world, that mastery required focus, humility, and relentless dedication. Emily packed her equipment carefully as the desert cooled. Soldiers had left the range, but the impact of her presence lingered. Lessons had been taught, respect had been earned, and the culture she influenced would endure. Her story, once local, now national, was a living example of how skill, patience, and discipline could transform not only individuals, but entire communities. As she walked back to her quarters, the soft crunch of sand underfoot mirrored the rhythm of her steady mind. Emily Carter had secured her legacy. It was not just in records or media attention, but in the quiet, enduring influence she had instilled in the soldiers she trained, the culture she reshaped, and the lessons that would ripple for generations. The worn scope rested safely in her case, a symbol of the journey, of skill refined over years, and of the enduring principle that mastery is earned, not assumed. Emily had proven that greatness could arise from discipline, focus, and humility. She had transformed doubt into respect, ridicule into recognition, and obscurity into lasting influence. And in the stillness of the Nevada desert, under a sky full of stars, Emily Carter understood that her story, the journey, the lessons, the marksmanship would endure far beyond her own lifetime. Her legacy was secure. Her influence would continue to inspire. Her mastery would remain a benchmark for precision, patience, and the quiet power of skill honed through decades of dedication. Desert wind whispered through the dunes, carrying the echoes of